Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Chris Bravata from Pinsight. Our topic today is development plans that build habits. Again, on the phone is Martin Lanick. He is the CEO of Pinsight and an organizational psychologist. Again, my name is Chris Bravata. I'm responsible for business development on the West Coast. Pinsight is an HR technology startup that is reinventing the ways companies develop talent through a very unique technology. Our simulations offer an excellent learning experience for leaders at different levels. Our solutions are built on the latest scientific findings and technology breakthroughs that allow clients to create customized leadership development programs based on the unique needs of the participants. And here you'll see a few of the clients that we're working with. At this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Martin to take us through today's webinar. Martin?
Yes, thank you, Chris. Today's webinar, we're going to be talking about development plans. And before we dive into the topic, I thought it might be interesting and fun just to take a quick poll. So as you look at your own development plan or the development plans of employees in your organization, what are the things that you most often see on there? So is it things like reading a book, taking a course, finding a mentor, or practicing on the job? So if you would just take a second and then respond on the control panel here to the right. We'll give it a couple seconds as people are responding. Good, and we can maybe just give it a few more seconds here. This is actually quite interesting to see. Very good. Okay, so let's close the poll. And the statistics or the results are that 18% of the attendees on this webinar have reading a book on their development plan, 55, so well over half, have taken a course, about 36% have finding a mentor, and 36 practice on the job. And I think this is very much the case in most organizations today. So when we think about development plans and developing skills, we need to immediately go to knowledge acquisition. So we think about improvement or development in terms of sitting in the classroom or maybe in front of a computer, taking an e-learning module, and then developing that way. So what I want to talk to you today about is an alternative, and how can we build development plans that, rather than building knowledge, build habits, and that's really my focus here. So when we look at the research literature, it actually suggests that development plans are not effective at all. So a recent review of 54 scientific studies that looked at the impact of development plans on individuals had found that after 1 year of having a development plan in place, there was absolutely no increase in competence of employees. And what's even more concerning, that having a development plan in place did not even increase employees' motivation to learn. Now, this information will be quite distressful, almost, I might say, considering that organizations spend $13 billion on long-term growth and development of their employees. So you might be asking, what is the problem? Why isn't there an impact that we're seeing from these development plans? And the reason is that most development plans just focus on knowledge acquisition. So it's things like taking a course or reading a book or maybe finding a mentor, but we very seldom focus on skill acquisition. And we know from decades and decades of psychological research that just having knowledge in an area does not really translate to behavioral change and to a skill. So those of you who have played a musical instrument might be well aware of this. You can be sitting in music theory and music appreciation classes all day long, but unless you pick up the violin or you touch the piano, you're not going to be able to play. So this is the premise. And you might be curious, well, what even happens with this knowledge that we acquire through reading or through courses? So a classic study in psychology, and probably some of you might have seen it, has found that people forget, and they forget a lot of information over time. So when we monitor retention of information that an individual has acquired, either in a classroom or maybe through some kind of a book, it turns out that an hour after that course, they have lost almost 50% of that knowledge, so they no longer retain it. And then we track it down to 31 days, so about a month later, and it's about 20% of that knowledge that is retained. So 80% of what you've learned in a course, you would have forgotten a month after you complete that course. So you all are probably familiar with the 70-20-10 principle. This is the classic principle in employee development. This is considered the golden standard or the best practice. So we all know this. So why is it that most employee development plans are only focusing on that 10% or maybe that 20%? Why is it that our development plans are not focusing on the 70%? And the reason is that it is quite difficult. So putting together a development plan that focuses on on-the-job practice is difficult because employees don't often know what to put on that plan. So what kind of exercises maybe can you do, or what do you do really to practice on the job? So how do we create structure around this concept? And my premise in this webinar is that we can actually use individual development plans to focus on that 70 in the 70-20-10. So we can build development plans in a way that facilitates this on-the-job practice. And as a result of practicing on the job, we help employees to build habits, and that is how they acquire the skill from bottom up. So they practice particular set of exercises, and then over time, research actually shows that it takes 66 days to acquire a new habit. And over time, they actually do build that habit. And they do it on the job. So we don't even have to worry about transfer of training or forgetting of the information because it's skill that they are acquiring. So now I want to turn the discussion over to how we actually build habits. So what is the formula for helping individuals or employees to build habits, and how can we structure then individual development plans so that they are facilitating that habit building? So the best practice, and this is all coming from research in psychology, it tells us that there are really 5 things that we should focus on. The first one is identifying a single exercise. So employees should be working or practicing a single exercise, and single exercise only. And the simpler the exercise it is, the easier it's going to be for them to actually turn that behavior or into a habit. Then the next point is to find a cue. So something in the environment, some kind of trigger or some kind of a reminder that will help them remember that, yes, you need to do this exercise today. Of course, there's repetition. So we know that repetition is the facilitator of habit building. So this exercise, when it's identified and once you have the cue, then employees need to repeat this exercise for about 100 days. And this really brings the whole idea of having a year-long or 6-month-long development plans into question. What I'm suggesting here is that we are much more focused with those development plans, and they maybe only focus on 3 months or 100 days. I talked about keeping it very simple, and this is a very important point. Research shows that the more complex a particular behavior is, the more difficult it is going to be for employees to practice and to find the motivation to do, and more time it's going to take to actually turn that into a habit. And then the last one is knowing what to practice, and this is where assessment's coming. So knowing what are the skills that you currently have, what are the skills that you're lacking, and then more specifically, how do you break down the skill into something that you can practice those individual single behaviors or exercises. So we'll talk about these one step at a time. So first, focusing on a single exercise. And when we generally think about employee development, we think about it in terms of competencies or skills or abilities. And the idea here is that we can take that larger concept of a skill or ability or competency and then break it down into individual action steps. So we can identify very simple exercises that together build that competency. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you need your managers in your organization to better empower others. So what does empowerment look like? What does it look like when a leader is truly empowering their team? Well, one behavior that they do that we could easily turn into an exercise is asking 2-3 targeted questions instead of offering their opinion. So we can teach managers every time they feel like they want to offer their opinion to ask 2-3 targeted questions instead. And examples of these questions could be, what have you already tried? Or what are the most important factors in this decision? Or what are the possible courses of action here for you? So we take this bigger competency or skill, empowerment, empowering others, whatever you call it in your organization, and then we identify a very specific exercise that is going to be the building block of this competency. So then the next step is to identify a cue. So for each employee or the managers that you are trying to develop, we ask them, what in the environment is going to trigger you, or how will you remember to actually practice this single exercise? So an example could be when an employee comes to you with a problem. That's going to be a trigger. So every time an employee comes to you with a problem, then instead of offering your opinion, you ask the 2-3 targeted questions. And this is going to be your cue. And then, of course, the next step is repetition. My recommendation to clients always is don't put together 6-month or year-long development plans. That is too big. So focus on something that is smaller and that is much more doable. It doesn't feel like a big job, and that is in addition to their regular work. Repetition, and the reason why I recommend 100 days is that research shows that simple behavior becomes automatic after 66 days. So what this means, you build a habit, it becomes automatic. You don't even think about it. So after 66 days, when an employee comes to you with a problem, your automatic response, without even thinking about it, is going to be asking those 2-3 targeted questions instead of launching into what you think about the problem and offering your opinion. Now, research also shows that it's very important to keep log of those repetitions. Because that log is going to help you determine whether you're on the right track or not. So when you think about the employee development form, one of the things that is absolutely critical is having that log and ability to check off every day that the person exhibits that behavior or they practice that exercise. The fourth point is to keep it very simple or super simple. So research shows that when the behavior is very simple or the exercise in question is very simple, it takes 1.5 times less time for it to become automatic or for it to become a habit rather than a complex behavior. So the simpler and the smaller behavior you start with, the quicker it's going to become a habit. And I always advise clients that they should really commit to only 5 minutes a day. So development that's only 5 minutes a day can go a really long way because it's something small, it's not going to create an anxiety, it's something doable. And as the example that I've given you with empowerment skills, so the way you can really build empowerment skills is finding that small behavior like asking targeted questions. And the key is that you practice it, and you practice it today, tomorrow, only 5 minutes a day, 66 times, and then guess what? It's going to become a habit. So here on this slide, I'm proposing what a development plan could look like in your organization. So rather than having a 6-month or year-long development plan, just identify something, start with something very small. So put a 100-day development plan together, or ask your employees to put a 100-day development plan together. And there are three key things that you need to identify. So first, you need to identify that simple exercise. So what is it that you're going to do for 5 minutes a day? Second thing is identify the cue. So when are you going to do it? What is going to be the reminder in the environment, or what is going to be the trigger that's going to help you remember that this is when the behavior is appropriate, or this is when you need to do the behavior. And then the last part is someplace to keep track of your progress. So this could be something as simple as check marks. So every day that you actually accomplish the behavior, or that you practice it, then you mark it off. And you should have about 66 of those boxes, because that's what research suggests, that it'll take 66 days before you actually turn that behavior into a habit. So let's dive deeper into empowering others as a competency. So we talked about the first exercise. So when you need to develop your managers or empowering skills, one thing that they can do is ask those 2-3 targeted questions instead of offering their opinion when an employee comes to them with a problem. Another very specific exercise could be asking questions to discuss expanding the decision-making authority of employees on projects or tasks. So an example of a question could be, what decisions are you comfortable making? And then again, you identify a cue. So maybe the cue is when the manager is assigning tasks or projects to their employees, that will trigger a response that is asking these questions about expanding the employee's decision-making authority on the task or the project. And then again, you have some place to track progress. And this is it. So this will be the development plan for 100 days. And through this very simple, very basic process, 5 minutes a day, the employee is going to be practicing on the job the behaviors that they need, or these exercises that they need, in order to build their empowerment skills from ground up. Do we have any questions at this point? Chris?
Not yet, and I just want to let everybody know that if you do have a question, please type your question into the question tab, and we'll go ahead and address those questions as they arise.
Yes, and then also at the end, so we'll have about 5 to 10 minutes for questions. So the last point I want to make here is that it is very important for employees to know what to actually practice. And there is the best way to really identify this is through objective assessment. I particularly want to focus on simulation-based assessments, because the advantage that they have over multiple choice tests is that they measure these skills in terms of behaviors. So what is being assessed in a simulation type assessment are those small units of behavior that you can easily turn into exercises. And I will actually give you an example of what that looks like. So I will take you into the Pinside report right here. And what you see immediately, I'm pulling up the Empowering Others report that a candidate receives after their assessment. So in this particular case, they were placed in 2 different types of situations. So they were placed in a coaching type of role play, and they had the opportunity to delegate work over emails. And then we observed how well they are empowering others in those 2 situations. So the beauty of simulation-based assessments is that they break down those larger skills into small units of behavior, and it's quite easy for you to identify or to turn these skills into exercises. So for instance, allocating appropriate level of decision-making authority, or providing support without removing responsibility. So these are all very small units of behavior that fall under empowerment skills or empowering skills, and you can easily turn these behaviors into exercises. For instance, we can also look at the consistency of the behavior over time, and then make determination whether this behavior is completely missing or whether that behavior is just inconsistent, and that can tweak the development planning process accordingly. Now with this type of assessment, so simulation-based assessments, candidates also get a set of exercises that are tied to their performance. So based on the observations that we made in the different situations, the candidates or the participants are actually getting feedback that is tied directly to the behaviors they need to practice. So it makes the development planning a bit easier because you have some exercises that you can pick from immediately. And that's what I did actually in preparation for this webinar as well. So I went through our system and then identified some of the exercises that you might find interesting. Okay, very good. I know we have about 9 minutes left, so why don't we unmute folks and then see if there are any questions or any discussion points. Yes, I can.
Hi, thank you very much for all your information. It's really relevant for us right now. But I have a quick question. In terms of short-term development plans, it seems really easy to implement this 100 days habits, but what are some other suggestions you can give us for those development plans that takes more than 12 months?
Yeah, so the idea, thank you, that's a very good question. So the idea is that these 100-day development plans essentially replace your year-long development plan because you won't need those anymore. So you would have a set of 100-day plans that keep the development very focused, and they keep focused on the skills and the exercises that the participant is practicing.
Okay, so in those terms, your suggestions, because I have seen some of the results of some of our clients, and we have seen a lot of competencies that have to be developed. So your advice is to focus in one competency, underline the specific behaviors, and start with a 100-day plan.
Yes, correct. Yes, so you want to keep it as simple as possible because then you are increasing the odds that people actually do it.
Sure. Okay.
And they don't feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, sure. And in terms of their job, it's really simple to trigger or to target one competency at once. Yeah.
Correct. Yes, and that's the whole point.
Perfect.
Yes, yes. So you want to really keep development at 5 minutes a day and no more than that.
Okay.
Very good question.
There was a question.
I realize that we have 1 minute. Yes?
There was a question about case studies that have been conducted using assessments before and after a 100-day plan.
Yes, so we have actually conducted research using our assessment where we tracked people over time, and what we find is that it generally takes about a month of practice before participants themselves notice that there is an improvement, and it takes on average 3 months before people are reporting that others in the organization have noticed improvements. So that's what our research has suggested. So if with that practice, you will actually see that there's a time lag. So of course the individual is going to notice first before other people in the organization will notice. So that's what I remember. If there are more specific questions on this research, I'm happy to follow up offline. Good. Do we have any other questions? Okay, good. Well, we are at the hour, so thank you very much, everyone. I hope you have a good day, good evening, and then we'll hope to see you again soon at another webinar that PinSight offers. Here's our contact information for myself and for Chris in case you need that. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.